This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
As much resources that would require on our end, as much risk as there potentially was in the calculus of will consumers accept it, if you're not always thinking about how can you deliver a better product experience, you're never going to be as competitive as you can be.
I think it's important that we start by letting the guests know that the universe has been trying with all its might to not have us do our podcast together. I was actually looking at my notes, and it was, months ago that, first of all, we started talking 8 months ago, and I'm joined today by Head of Brand Marketing, Starry, Michael Smith. What's up, my man? Good to see you.
Oh, not much, man. I'm happy to be here. Appreciate you taking the time. But yeah, the universe did not want these two forces to come together. That's for sure.
I just think it wasn't it just in the spirit of courage and resilience, right? Like there was a lot in working against us, but I'm actually really glad that it's happening this way. Show's going to run in 2024. Lots of new year, new you people. And in an odd way, if you really think about our relationship and how we met, it's cool to see you doing your new year, new you, I'm air quoting a little bit here, because when we first met, we met back in Banff in Canada, probably one of the most like, what just happened? How did I get dropped into this movie? If you think about it, gorgeous place in Canada. And back then I was sharing my story on courage. And I think you were in an act break. You were kind of like, if we're going to keep it real, you were frustrated because you're a talented guy. And I felt like you were worried you were wasting away, not getting a chance to take your cut and take your shot. And what's awesome is that here we are a little over a year later. I think it's very clear that, I just saw the study come out about the second fastest growing brand among U.S. adults. I do my homework, Michael. I do my homework. All right. Saw that. Congrats, by the way.
Oh, I appreciate that. Listen, when you're second to Chat GPT on any fastest growing brand list, you're in good company. So, we were excited to see it. It's been an awesome launch year for Starry. But to your point, man, it's crazy what 12 or 18 months can do. And so I've just been excited and blessed to be in this role. But it's a very different circumstance than when we first met. That's for sure.
Yeah, but again, I wish I could have gotten back up there because a year later you take the stage at up in Banff at the Gathering. Great conference. We love those guys. They'd probably get pissed that I called it a conference. It's not a conference. It's a gathering. That's why that's the name. But give me like a little color. Like take me back to, did you have a pinch me moment? Because, that's a good barometer for a year goes by and here you are now. Or were you just like so focused on making sure you nailed your message?
It's really funny. I love the team behind the Gathering, and you're right. It's not a conference, although there's no other like effective descriptive word that people will understand until they go there. So you kind of have to call it a conference, but it's really not in tonality and emotionality. And so, I remember again when I went up and we first met, and I had obviously known the guys for a while. I'm coming up there off of definitely like my biggest career failure to date. And there are always a few of them on the way, but like this was a big swing and miss. And so I'm a little down and out and trying to figure out like what's next. Where do I want to take my career? Like what is success going to look like for me long term? Can I get up off the mat, dust myself off a little bit, and try to find whatever success is going to be for me? And so like those were the circumstances. And for me, being around such, inspiring marketers and just people allowed me to kind of reinvigorate my sense of, myself and what I wanted and why I wanted it. And so, I came back to PepsiCo like not long after we'd met in Banff. And, I was kind of still getting my feet wet back in the organization when I had the opportunity to take over the Starry brand. And, I'd spent my entire career working on all of these amazing brands, but one thing that had been, or at least I've been really cognizant of, you work on Gatorade, you work on Pepsi, and you're a brand steward. These brands were built and became iconic long before you touch them. And your job is kind of just to not mess it up. Maybe you can add something to it, but really, like, honestly, like, don't mess it up. And I had spent my career, like, hopefully, like, contributing positively to those brands, but mostly not messing it up. Starry is the first time in my career I've really been able to take something that, when I started working on it, no consumer had ever heard of it, hadn't rolled out, hadn't been to the marketplace. Like, we were truly building it. With those other brands, I would always think about, like, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, let me not think that I'm tall. And this is the opportunity for, me, the whole team, to build something that matters and culture matters in business, can become, iconic in its own right. And so that was a huge, huge opportunity. And to your point, like, I get the opportunity to come into it. I came into it 3 weeks before it was supposed to launch. And so that was not the moment for, let me, sit back and think about how much success I've had. No, you're building it, right? And you're building it every single day. And so it wasn't until I was back in Banff this year. We've been almost through, our first year. Yeah, we're gearing up for year two, but the brand has been successful. We're feeling good about it. And, the guys asked me to come back. And, when I had first presented up there, I was representing Gatorade. And it's easy to talk about brands, right? And brand journeys. It's harder when it's, come back and talk to us about your leadership journey. Like, that's different. That's way more introspective, right? You have to take a little bit of stock. So, for me, getting back up there and being able to not just talk about my own journey, but talk about it in the context of how my biggest failure, I think, has hopefully set up what I believe will be one of my biggest successes, made me feel really good about where I've been, where we've gotten to. Now there's a lot more to be done, but it was a nice moment to think about, where I've come.
Was that the arc of your conversation, or did you go in a different direction?
No, the conversation for me was really about what it means to be a leader versus what it means to be a marketer. I felt like I had spent a lot of time in my career, understanding and building expertise in the discipline of marketing. Like, that I had become really good at. When I look at why I made missteps in my career and why I had an opportunity in an early stage business and hadn't been successful, it's because I didn't or hadn't fully embraced the transition from being a marketer to being a leader, and being a leader in a business context, and understanding what my role was, what was required of me, and operating accordingly. And what I think has been able to make, Starry successful, and been a small part of what makes Starry successful, is I think I've done a better job of understanding what my job is, what my role is within the team, and focusing more on truly trying to act and behave as a leader versus just driving pure expertise in marketing. And that to me was a significant shift mentally that led to a significant shift in how I approached the business. And I do think has allowed us to have some of the success that we've had on Starry that I don't think I've had in other stops. And so that was the genesis of the idea. But to me, it felt very personal around how I've shifted my focus, tried to take stock where I've come up short, and behave differently to get to different outcomes.
And as you know, leaders aren't necessarily the greatest marketers, and great marketers aren't necessarily great leaders. And so as you think about this role that you're in, and I know you're a baller, right? I know that's in you, right? And in the spirit of the metaphor, do you see yourself as the coach of this team, the point guard of this team, the GM of this team, the sixth man of this team, or are you the water boy on the team? Let's get all the choices out there. I already know that's not the answer, but I got to give you all the options.
Yeah, as a bad college basketball player, I think water boy would have been the most apt analogy. But in my current role, I like to think about myself as the point guard. And maybe that's because I never could pursue coaching because I never could take myself off the court and get the same rush and emotional intensity. And I think in this context, I think about it that way because what's helped me is understand that there's still moments where I need to get in and play, to continue the analogy, or I have to get a shot up. But what's more important to our success is spending time thinking about how you put all of the team members, both internal and external, in the right position to be successful. Get people the ball at the right time, make sure that they're getting the right shots, that they're feeling fully engaged. That is what's more important in my current role, is making sure that the sum is greater than the parts. And if I spend more of my time thinking about that, we are going to have more opportunity to be successful. So that doesn't mean that there are not moments in time where my hopeful expertise as a marketer needs to come into play, and I need to step in and be really helpful in that way. But the majority of the time needs to be about making sure that everyone else is positioned to be as successful as possible. Because when the rest of the team, like, that's when the magic happens. Like, not like when I'm trying to lean in as the best marketer in the world, which I am not. But when I'm helping our team truly operate at its best is when we're really successful. So that's where I try to spend most of my.
It's funny. I feel like I'm clearly older than you, so I would have probably said point guard a decade ago as well, because I still want to be on the floor. I want to be in the action. I also want my team to know I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves with them and be in there with them. Now, I think I acknowledge I'm more in the coach bucket. I sure hope no one on my team's like water boy, but like I think I'm more in the coach bucket. But there's all these words. I don't know if it's because we come from brand and marketing that like you can't help but step back and deconstruct. And I think like marketing is a word I think that I do this with. Like marketers almost never marketed marketing to the rest of the organization, so people don't totally get. It's not just like go get us customers. It's like same with advertising. I think advertising never advertised advertising, and you wonder why advertising has a bad reputation now. And I think coach is another one of these words. Like I run into a lot of people that say they're a coach, and it doesn't make me. I mean, I have a coaching program, and I don't even sell it in our offerings because I don't like how it sounds off. Like you're not in it. It sounds slick, or like anyone could be a coach. You're a coach. You're a coach. But if you said, I want to be the Izzo, the Tom Izzo, or the Coach K, and how do you get the most out of a team and really be strategic? I am so in on that version of a coach. I just don't like the today with a brand. Oh, I'm a coach. What makes you qualified to be a coach? Right. So that's my little gripe in that arena. Sorry for my rant. You had said, I love how you said this, like no one knew Starry, and you show up and you get the opportunity to like really help put them on the map. It reminded me of one of my favorite interview questions back when I had an agency. Like I used to ask, would you rather take a brand that no one's ever heard of before and put them on the map? Or would you rather take a brand that everybody knows and just make the world think just a little bit differently about them? And like how hard it is to change someone's behavior. If you think Nike is something, it's hard to make you think Nike is something else. So of those two options, I mean, I know you're living it now, and Gatorade is sort of on the other side. So is there one that you prefer over the other?
It's a great question, and it's different. I don't want to say fully different skill sets, but I would probably say different things at different times in my career. And I've worked, I think I've been in 9 or 10 different roles over the course of my career. And if you ask me about any of them individually, I will say that at that moment in time, it was the right thing for me to do. And I really enjoyed it and loved it. To not pontificate and actually answer your question, I'm really loving building things. I think the hard part about, to your point, trying to make people think a little bit differently outside of the ingrained mental structures that they've attached to any brand that you might be working on is you're working within such defined constraints, and not just in the mind of the consumer, but in the mind of the organization. in the structure and processes of the organization. You have to do a lot to take people who see a certain brand a certain way and move it even slightly to a different space. And that's not just the consumer, that's everyone who touches it. That's your agency partners, that's your internal teams from both marketing to sales to PR to operations. It's a lot to try to shift that mindset and to drive buy-in to attempt to shift that mindset, especially if it's a large business where people are always designed to be protective over what already exists and what they already have. And so I guess that's loss aversion to some degree. And so it becomes really, really difficult to think about existing things differently because of the inherent risk reward calculus that's never in your favor. When it comes to Starry or anything net new, that doesn't exist in the same way. There's no risk when you're starting at zero. And so you have the opportunity to build it a little bit differently. The risk reward calculus is different. And so you can have a lot more fun with it and you can take a lot more chances as you try to build the memory structures in the mind of the consumer. I think the hardest part is it's very easy when you're operating outside of those constraints to draw very far outside of the lines. And part of building a brand does come with consistency. And that's what develops brand iconography, is showing up in a consistent way. Whether you're building the brand personality, the brand visual identity, whatever it is, that needs to be consistent. And it's much easier to be consistent when you've had a lot of reps. The Pepsis and the Gatorades of the world have had a lot of reps, right? They know what triggers the brand in the mind of the consumer, how they want to come across, what brand elements they want to lean into. And everyone gets that. It's not a process on a piece of paper. There's an emotional nature to it where I know that's Pepsi, or I know that's Gatorade, or I know that's bubbly, or I know that's Mountain Dew, whatever it might be, you know it. When you're building something new and you're trying to get those reps, you're trying to build those muscles, it's really easy to miss. And so how quickly can you find right? And can you consistently deliver against that? I think that's the hardest part when it comes to building something new, but also finding that is, in my opinion, the most fun part.
I mean, January 2024, out with the old, in with the new. Some people might not even know, I mean, speaking of out, like, so Sierra Mist is out, right? Hence, Starry is in. You talk about a brave move, a courageous move, because, I mean, a lot of people knew Sierra Mist, and yet this move was made. Can you share what you can share on the decision, why y'all made this call, and what you thought Starry had that maybe Sierra Mist didn't have?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one of those things that you have to think about long and hard from a business perspective. And I think the reality is, as much as we love that brand, and again, there obviously were consumers that love that brand, but you know, internally, like, we're all consumers too. And that was a brand that we all cared about, that a lot of people have put a significant amount of time and effort into building. I think what we needed to do was be really honest with ourselves and our consumer base and say, can we build a better product? Is there a better opportunity here? And I think that what we decided was there was an opportunity to deliver a better experience to consumers. And as much resources that would require on our end, as much risk as there potentially was in the calculus of will consumers accept it, if you're not always thinking about how can you deliver a better product experience, you're never going to be as competitive as you can be. And so I think we took a lot of stock and said, is this the best product experience we can deliver to the marketplace in order to have the most competitive brand? And I think what we decided was, on the product side, we could do better. And on the brand side, we can do better. And when those two things are obviously the case, you have a responsibility to try to put something better in the marketplace. And so I think that's what we decided, is that there was an opportunity for us to deliver something better as a product organization. There was an opportunity for us to deliver something better as a marketing organization. And then we had to go out and prove it. And I think we still need to go out and prove it. And we have to do that every day. But the opportunity was there. And whenever it is there, like, we should be jumping on it to take advantage of it. And that's what we did in this case. So far, so good. But again, the jury is still very much out on if that was the right decision. So we have a lot of work still to do.
So yeah, new brand, new you, right? Zero sugar, lemon lime, what have you learned so far? And again, as a competitive person, what's like absolutely driving you mad at this point? Like what I like, let's hear a learning and then somewhere that you're just like, okay, if I had the ball in my court, we got to pick up the pace on X.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The thing that I learned was in relation to Sierra Mist. So Sierra Mist like was not, driving a ton of business by the beginning of this year when we decided to move on from it. And coming into it, I did not expect a lot of vocal consumer outreach around that brand and around the shift to Starry. And I could not have been more wrong. There was, and has continued to be to some degree, a lot of calls for Sierra Mist, bring Sierra Mist back. Like, where's Sierra Mist going? Why did you just put a Starry wrapper on a Sierra Mist can? And by the way, it is a completely new formula and a completely different product. I underappreciated how much passion there was for a brand like Sierra Mist. And what that really takes me to, and this is, something that I should have known given, the history of what I've worked on, but people have a really strong connection to the foods and the beverages that they put in their body. It is not just a one-off casual decision, especially when it comes to something new. And so we definitely underestimated the amount of connectivity that Sierra Mist as a brand. And so that's something that I'll obviously take as a learning moving forward. I think it's made our marketing better on Starry, but that was the first thing when I started looking in the comment section as we were posting across social media platforms. I spend a lot of my time in the comment section. You can learn a lot, but that was one of the first things that jumped out. Is like, oh, there's much more brand love here than we initially thought, and we have to make sure that Starry does enough, both again as a brand and a product in the marketplace, to overcome what was an underbelly of significant support for Sierra Mist that I don't think that we fully expected. And then when it comes to how do we continue to be really successful and what do we need to do to win in the marketplace, I think the thing that I'm most focused on is how do we continue to build our muscles and get reps creatively so that when we put the brand out into the marketplace, it feels like Starry. And I think one of the things that really helps us today and really helps all brands today is by the end of this year or by the end of 2023, we will have published 500 pieces of social content. 30 years ago, you make 2 ads, and those are your swings, right? And we're making traditional ads, and that's all great. But almost twice a day, we're getting reps on what does content from Starry look like, feel like, the tonality, what are consumers responding to, and that's driven a ton of learning for us as a working marketing team. And so if I think about what we really need to do, what's going to allow us to win, we have to get to a point where we can see a piece of content and everyone that touches the Starry business can say, yes, that's Starry, or no, that's not Starry. And nobody has to ask why. It is not a rational or logic-based analysis. It is a purely emotional analysis. If we can get to a point where we know what is or is not Starry right away, that's when I know that we've really nailed it. We're not all the way there, and we have to get there quickly.
So 500 pieces of social. What do you think you'll do in 24?
We're going to try to double it. I want to double it. And so, nobody, I don't think there's a person on my team that wants to hear that, but I think we can. I think that first and foremost, what's so great about the world that we live in today, well, good or bad, depending on where you sit, I suppose, but we live in a world of abundance. Like it is a supply side world. It is about volume and abundance and how much can be put out there. And then obviously all of the algorithms that refine what you do see from that ocean of abundant content or brand offerings or whatever it might be. And I think that if we're going to be really successful, we have to live within that world. We have to understand that the opportunity here is to create as much as possible so that what filters through at the end of the day are big wins, not to refine and refine and refine internally so that the few things that you do, you hope will blow up and be big wins. There's too much consumer control, algorithmic control over what becomes popular that, at least in my opinion, quantity is the way into that. versus trying to act as a stakeholder or gatekeeper that defines what quality looks like. Put out as much as you possibly can whenever there's a good idea, put it out into the marketplace and see what catches fire. And I think that's the world that we live in today. And I think we have to work with those realities, not against those realities. So for me, everything that we put out is a learning opportunity, and it's a chance for it to blow up. And if it doesn't, that's fine. There's the marginal cost to create something at this point in time is minimal if it exists at all. So accept that marginal cost, go big, create as much as you can, and see what flows through the end of the funnel, what comes out the bottom and really wins for you. And so that's where I think there's an opportunity for us to, at a minimum, double our output year over year.
It's not that transactional, right? I mean, it still needs to be emotional. It's still right. It still needs to feel like Starry. And I wonder if that, and I guess maybe here's where I was going on the bigger question of we'll call it, we'll say 900. We'll say you get right there. Your team's going to love this. What percent of that is now handled by your own in-house team?
I would say probably about a third. And we have great agency partners and we have a great in-house team. And so for us, I think there's an opportunity for us to see really great collaboration through in-house capabilities that are better than they were a decade ago. And hopefully agency partnerships that were better than they were a decade ago. I think we have to continue to be really great partners and highly collaborative with all of the external expertise that we bring into the brand, because it's all out there. There's no reason, in my opinion, that we should be in-housing everything. We have too many great partners that have their domain expertise that we can leverage and work with, and that's how we work on the Starry brand. While at the same time, building the right internal capabilities at a PepsiCo level and tapping into those for Starry when and where we can. And so for us, it's always a mix and a combination. And I think that allows us to get the best of both worlds and to bring the best talent to the table. Because to your point, the hard part about increasing the quantity of content that you make is ensuring that it all feels right for the brand. Now, part of that's always still going to be finding, right? But whether it all comes through the bottom of the funnel and people are like, that's amazing. You want everything you put in the top to still feel like you're proud of it coming from the Starry brand, that it feels right for the Starry brand or whatever brand that you're working on. And so I think getting both in-house and external talent to help feed that beast is the right way after it. And what's great to me, and I'm not of this generation, but I'm so inspired by some of the younger team members that we have and their ability to ideate and ideate and ideate and create and create and create. And it's like the switch never turns off. I don't know where the bottomless well of ideas comes from, but they live and have come up in a world where they are going directly from idea to realized piece of content faster than I would say in either of our generations. And so it does allow us to put out more, and it allows more of that to feel right for the brand, but we couldn't do it without a combination of internal and external resources.
It seems like you're having a lot of fun playing with the NBA, by the way. Are you loving this? I mean, is this just like dream come true? What do you say?
Uh, and listen, it's a dream come true for me personally. And it's one of those beautiful times where what I'm passionate about on a day-to-day basis and what our business requires sync up beautifully. So for Starry as a brand, when we're thinking about how do we launch it, we were looking for a partner that brought real scale at a national level, but also brought real relevance with younger consumers. And there are not that many of those. There are very few large properties and brands that we would have the opportunity to work with that scaled nationally and also really mattered to younger consumers. And the NBA was one of those and was the obvious opportunity for us. And they've been great partners. We love working with the league. I don't think that there's a better sports property, again, when it comes to really resonating with young consumers, but also scaling up and down the spectrum. And they've given us something to anchor to as a brand. And obviously, Starry's not Gatorade. I've worked on Gatorade. So that brand approaches sports differently. But the NBA impacts so much culture and so much lifestyle All nothing to do with who won the game at the end of the day. And that gives Starry a place to live that's relevant to the NBA, to the culture around the NBA and basketball more broadly, and gives us a place and a space to play that doesn't necessarily have to do with what's taking place on the court, because obviously that's not where we live. So we've been really happy with the partnership. It's been extremely helpful in allowing us to have a successful year one. And to me, it's just a great example of where what you need as a business lines up with the perfect partner for your brand. And yes, for me personally, as a basketball fan and someone who played the game my entire life, there's not a better brand or sports property that I would want to collaborate with.
Just to give the NBA some props here in the spirit of Courageous Podcast. Look, how awesome and bold was the in-season tournament. I mean, please tell me you're in the camp of Bravo. And I actually don't, I don't know too many people that follow the NBA that aren't like, I don't get it. For me, it's like when I think about courage, and it's probably a little soapboxy for you, but we always talk about knowledge, faith, and action, and you need each of those for it to be courageous. And like they had the knowledge, right? They basically probably had somewhere that people don't really sort of think the NBA is as potent until Christmas Day. At least that's what it felt like, right? And from that point to the rest of the season, it's on. And then they saw what was happening with EPL soccer with these in-season tournaments. So, and then they could play, they could experiment with the courts, right? Like all of it just worked. Is that behind the doors at Pepsi? Do you guys feel the same way?
I love it. And it's funny, we talked earlier about risk and reward, right? When it comes to brands, and especially legacy brands. And I can see a world where you're sitting, in the league offices and you're trying to figure it out. And there's a lot of risk. There's a good amount of risk. And bravo to the league for focusing on the reward, focusing on the upside, and then going and delivering it. You know, we're moving, I think, as a society to more of a focus on events and less of a focus on just continual opportunities for entertainment and engagement. There is so much that you can spend your time on a day-to-day basis that it's gonna be hard over an 82 game regular season to just get people to tune in for basketball games. I can be scrolling TikTok, I can be doing whatever else. But when it comes to events still bring the monoculture back together. And I think the in-season tournament proved that there was an opportunity for another event moment on the NBA calendar. That's going to bring fans in early. It's going to get advertisers another platform. It's going to showcase the talent in the league playing hard. The games were great. And to me, what I thought was the absolute best part of the in-season tournament, because strategically, I thought it all made sense. It was the courts. And the courts gave you a visual signal that something was different. Even if you're a casual fan tuning in, the courts told you, wait, what's happening here? There's something different happening here tonight. And I think that too often we don't think about what are those really quick sensory cues that are going to help people pick up the message that we're trying to deliver. And that was a great canvas that they had that I never thought about utilizing, that obviously the league thought about utilizing, that I think was a huge unlock to making the in-season tournament feel different. So I'm happy for the league. I'm hoping that in future years, Starry can get even more involved. I think it's a great platform. I'm sure they'll tweak it a little bit, but bravo just on the continued innovation and the execution surrounding it.
And that, I mean, their court is your can in some ways, right? It's not like you can't do collabs, and I'm sure you're having those conversations as well. But I want to go back to, I kind of like was in one of my earlier rants, which I apologize on, but like on like marketing needs to marketing and advertising needs to advertising. There was a moment in time where I felt like you could say the same thing about brand, where brand, there were certain people that was trying to make brand like a 4-letter word. And I try not to vilify brands on here, but I think when Brandless was around, what were they really saying? They're like, no, you don't have to pay for brand. That's just an extra cost being passed over to you. And now, as a guy that has brand in his title, right, head of brand marketing at Starry, I have a feeling that you see brand differently. And And earlier you had also mentioned you're learning. We're in year one. Like, what have you learned about the brand? Like, if you go out now and explain, well, no, the differences between Sierra Mist and us, I don't think you need to explain them. But what have you learned about the brand that you could share, like when you describe Starry?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so let me unpack a couple of things, at least from my perspective. So the idea of brand and brand becoming a four-letter word, I think where the idea of brand gets problematic is when you start applying it to people. People talk about their brand, his or her brand. What that signals to people is I'm putting a facade on who I am and my personality, and that facade is designed to, in the worst case scenario, manipulate. I think that's when brand starts to feel toxic. I think at the end of the day, people are people and they behave how they behave and they have personalities and they're human beings. I think when you try to apply the idea of brand to individuals, I think that's when it becomes a difficult conversation, at least in my opinion. I think the power of brand in a product world and where brands can be really effective and additive is when brands are focused on doing things for their consumers and not to their consumers. And to me, that feels very, very different when you're trying to be additive to how people build their own self identity, how they see the world, how they think about what matters to them, and you're doing things for people. Like there's an opportunity, there's a win there, and it's meaningful for the company, it's meaningful for the consumer base, it's meaningful for the community that you operate in. When all you care about as a brand is doing things to people, making them feel differently, see things differently, purely through your own lens. You're just communicating whatever you want to communicate. That to me is again where brand can become a four-letter word. But when brand's applied to product rather than people, and when it's used to do things for people rather than to people, then I think you're in a much better place. And I know that's what we're trying to do as Starry every day. I think that to the second part of your question, like what I've learned as we've gone through the last year and we're thinking about how we build this is, it's a challenger brand. There's a very large competitor in the lemon lime soda category that's been around for a very long time. My inclination is to, punch up and to challenge and to David and Goliath and to, get in their face and say, we're here. We're not going to be intimidated. We're not going anywhere. That is my natural inclination as a competitor. That is something that as we've gone through and figured out what we want Starry to be about, how we want it to show up for consumers, that's an edge that we have to sand down. We can be competitive. We're here to compete and we're here to hopefully win. At the same time, we talk about the brand a lot as being weirdly refreshing. And we try to put everything through the filter of weirdly refreshing. And that's what I want our team to emotively really understand. What does that look like? What does that not look like? And when we unpack those two words, weirdly comes from wanting a brand that feels offbeat, fun, doesn't take itself too serious. We're selling soda, and can have a little bit of fun and do so in a way that can be a little absurd at times because we think that just amplifies the humor and the fun that's built into the brand. But when we talk about refreshing, that's about being uplifting, positive, seeing silver linings. And the more younger consumers we've talked to, despite the fact that they can doom scroll all day and look, and they have more access to all of the information that says the world's a horrible place than any other previous generation, they always have a sense of positivity and a belief that the world's going to be a better place and they are going to make the world a better place. And so we wanted that positivity and that ability to uplift built into the Starry brand. And it's really hard to deliver that while at the same time wanting to punch the competitor in the face. And so that's been the piece that we really had to make sure that we stay true to and we don't let our competitive instincts run away with us. So I think that's been the piece that we've learned and that we're still working through.
If I was to pick an NBA team that you should sponsor, my first take was the Sacramento Kings. They seem like a weirdly refreshing roster, right? Any team that has JaVale McGee, I think 15 years in the league is weirdly refreshing. And they're winning. It's refreshing to see. And they care about culture. Like in the NBA outside of them, is there another team that you're like, I know you got to probably be real careful on this one? Is there a team that you feel is weirdly refreshing from your lens?
We have a ton of team partners that we work with. We feel that all of those team partners are important to Starry and how we build our brand here. So I'll go backwards a little bit. What I really love and where I can look to a little inspiration is the Oklahoma City Thunder when they were coming up with Harden and Durant and Russ, and they were the new kids on the block, and they were going to change the game, and James is just starting to grow the beard, and you know they're playing the game in a different way, and they're having fun with it, and the sky feels like the limit, and they're just going to approach it completely differently. That is, if I'm taking inspiration from an NBA team, I think it's that era Oklahoma City Thunder team that I would take the most inspiration from, just because of how youthful they were and the way that youthful exuberance came out in the way they played.
You talked a little bit about the NBA courts and how important that color pop is, and you can't help but notice the pop with Starry. Like the color pop is real. It's like a dopamine drip right in front of your face. I'm assuming this is on purpose and intentional, but it plays, right? This is culture, right?
Yeah, I think that the work that was done to visually bring a brand to life, and that's hard, right? I would say that the only thing that's harder than building the visual ID for a brand is naming a brand. Both of those things are really, really challenging. And, our team's done a great job. I think the goal was to, yes, we want to make sure it pops. Like there's certain, like, when it's sitting on a shelf in a retail location, is it going to catch consumers' eyes? There's all of that. So we wanted to make sure that it really stood out. It also had to communicate the product category, right? So how do you bring lemon lime to life? And again, we're not the first player in the space, so you're not operating from a pure white space. So how do you feel different but still bring the product category to life? But what I love about it is the way that we integrated the yellow and the green that represents the category, but then pulled that through to the two animated characters that we introduced to represent the brand, Lemon Lime. And Lem is a lime wrapped in a lemon, and lime is a lemon wrapped in a lime. Yeah, I don't know. But it's so much fun, and it gives the brand a voice and a personality that's so distinct. I think one of the hard parts in working on brands, especially when you come to something new, a lot of brands don't have a lot of iconography that they've built over time. You got a logo, a word mark, and a product, in this case maybe a bottle or a can, and that's often it. And that shows up everywhere because there's nothing else that you can use to represent the brand. I think when our design team like went in the lab and really built this, there are so many design elements that we can use on any given basis, and they're all there to depict exuberance and positivity, and it comes through constantly. And we built the characters, and we built backstories for the characters, and so when you want a mouthpiece for the brand, you have two automatically. And we're just scratching the surface of what we can do with them. But the way we built this and said, we are going to have all of these design elements that can represent the brand visually, that can represent the brand in content, and we're not going to just have a logo and a can, I think has given us so much opportunity. The playground is just full of fun tools when it comes to Starry. And that's kudos to our design team and the team that really thought deeply about visually what this brand needs to mean and what it needs to stand for.
All right, vulnerable moment time. So, 2024 is here. As you think about personally a place where you want to be a little bit more brave this year, and what is one place or one thing you want to tackle and take on that might be a tent outside your comfort zone? And I know you're a competitor, and that's a tough question, but keep it real with us.
I've just started to think about this New Year's resolutions, all of these things. It's an opportunity to step back, think a little bit differently around how you can be a better person. I want to be a better parent. So I have a 3.5-year-old who is the best part of every day. And I've tried to be a really thoughtful parent, but especially over the course of the last year, it's easy for career or other things to suck up time and focus and energy. And I try to remember that all of these extremely long days, right? Like people say, like the days are long, the years are short. I try to take that very seriously. And over the course of the last year, if I was to be perfectly honest with myself, I don't know that I've balanced that in the way that I want to long term. And all of that's time you don't get back, right? And so the big thing for me going into next year, like, yeah, I want Starry to be successful. I want my career to be successful, like all those things. That's great. But what's going to matter most to me long term is my son the best version of himself, and have I impacted that in the most positive way? And so that to me is the biggest focus for next year. That's where I think that I can improve the most and where improvement matters the most.
And a decade from now, do you see him as a point guard, a coach, or a water boy?
I see him as a starving artist in Brooklyn, probably. Who knows? I have no idea. He's got a basketball hoop. He's got a football. He's got every sports tool known to man. So if he doesn't take to it, it won't be for lack of exposure. But whatever he digs, I'm sure I'm going to be digging too.
That's awesome, man. Hey, thanks so much for joining on the show. Good luck this year. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep us in the loop, man. I mean, we're gonna be watching from afar. I'll take swag. That's a pretty cool sweatshirt you got on. Send me swag, and stay courageous out there, Michael. Thanks, buddy.
Will do. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.